The most influential British institution of the last 500 years wasn't the monarchy, the church, or even parliament. It was a company that started in a single London office and grew to command a private army of over 260,000 soldiers, twice the size of the actual British army at the time. A company that ruled a continent of 200 million people from a boardroom. This is the story of the East India Company, the world's first and most terrifying corporate superpower. But this isn't just a history lesson. The ghost of this corporation haunts modern Britain. Its DNA is embedded in our economy, our politics, and our biggest debates. From too big to fail banks to the power of tech giants. From the promises of global Britain to the privatization of our public services, the blueprint was written centuries ago. So, it is essential to stay tuned, as this report will uncover 5 shocking lessons from this corporate ghost. Lessons that reveal how a 400-year-old company can help us future-proof our understanding of the world today. The 5th and final lesson is the one today's politicians are desperately hoping has been forgotten. The story begins in 1600, when the East India Company was born, but its charter contained a revolutionary piece of legal technology, the world's first limited liability corporation, or LLC. This created a legal shield, separating the personal fortunes of its investors from the company's actions. It was a moral innovation that allowed for immense risks to be taken: war, exploitation, conquest, without the threat of personal ruin for the shareholders back in London. By the mid-18th century, the EIC was an economic leviathan, controlling half the world's trade. After its private army conquered the wealthy province of Bengal, it became a ruler, collecting taxes from millions. Its share price exploded. But behind the scenes, the costs of constant warfare and rampant corruption created a mountain of debt. In 1772, the bubble burst. The largest corporation on earth was on the verge of bankruptcy, threatening to bring down the entire British financial system with it. The British government could not let it fail. Parliament stepped in with a massive loan, billions in today's money, in what became the world's first state-sponsored corporate bailout. The core lesson from this crisis is twofold, revealing the blueprint for every major corporate bailout since, including 2008. First, it establishes the dangerous precedent of moral hazard. When a company is too big to fail, it can privatize its profits while knowing the public will be forced to cover its losses. But more critically, it shows that a bailout is never just a financial rescue, it's a political power grab. The government's intervention in 1773 was a calculated move to impose state control, transforming the semi-independent EIC into a direct managing agency for the British Empire in India. This pattern, corporate crisis, followed by a state bailout that redefines the boundaries between public and private power, was established over 250 years ago. The East India Company didn't just lobby politicians, its key figures were the politicians. Company officials known as nabobs used their vast Indian fortunes to buy their way into British society and, crucially, purchase seats in Parliament. This created a powerful India lobby in Westminster that ensured national policy, from trade laws to military deployments, always served the company's bottom line. Today, buying a seat is illegal, but corporate influence is just as pervasive. Through a multi-billion-pound lobbying industry and the revolving door, the seamless transition of ministers and civil servants into lucrative private sector jobs in the very industries they once regulated. The East India Company used its profits to get its directors into Parliament. Today, corporations spend millions on lobbying and hire former ministers. Where is the line between legitimate democratic engagement and a corporate capture of government? Share your opinion in the comments below. The lesson from the EIC is that the lines between public duty and private interest weren't just blurred, they were structurally non-existent. It was considered normal for MPs who were major shareholders to legislate on matters that would directly enrich them. What we now call a conflict of interest was, in fact, the fundamental business model of empire. The modern revolving door is a direct descendant of this legacy, where a state-corporate fusion is baked into centuries of British governance. In 1750, India was the workshop of the world, producing a staggering 25% of all global industrial output. Britain, by contrast, produced less than 2%. But after the East India Company seized political power, it didn't just compete with this industry, it systematically executed it. The company rigged the game. Its agents forced Indian weavers to sell their world-class textiles exclusively to them at rock-bottom prices. Then, it monopolized raw cotton, forcing those same weavers to buy their essential materials at massively inflated prices. The weaver lost both ways, as a seller and as a buyer. The result was a great economic reversal. India was forcibly de-industrialized, transformed from a global manufacturer into a captive supplier of raw cotton for British factories. By 1900, its share of world output had collapsed to just 2%. This playbook finds a chilling echo in the dominance of today's tech giants. Like the East India Company, firms like Amazon, Google, and Apple don't just compete in the market, they often are the market. The ultimate form of monopoly isn't just controlling a product, it's controlling the essential infrastructure that everyone else needs to do business. The East India Company owned the platform of its day, the trading posts, the shipping routes, and the tax systems. Today, Amazon controls the digital marketplace, Google controls the digital roads, and Apple controls the digital real estate on our phones. The de-industrialization of India stands as a powerful historical warning. When a single private company gains sovereign-like control over an economy's core infrastructure, the consequences can be devastating. What happens when you privatize an entire state? After 1765, the East India Company found out. It was no longer just a trader, it became the sovereign ruler of Bengal, responsible for tax collection, justice, and administration. This was the ultimate privatization project. A publicly traded corporation running a country. Its primary legal duty wasn't to the 20 million people of Bengal, but to its shareholders in London. In 1769, this conflict of interest turned deadly. A severe drought struck, and crops failed. A responsible government would have provided relief and suspended taxes. The company did the opposite. To meet shareholder profit targets, its tax collectors were ordered to be even more ruthless. Tax rates were increased on the starving population. The result was the Great Bengal Famine of 1770. Up to a third of the population in the worst-hit areas starved to death. This wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a policy-induced famine, where the corporate profit motive catastrophically overrode the state's duty to protect human life. This horror story is a vital lesson for the modern UK debate over privatizing essential services like water, rail, and energy. The same fundamental conflict exists today. Private utility companies have a legal duty to maximize profit for shareholders. The public needs affordable, reliable services. We see the results across the UK. Water companies pay out billions in dividends while dumping raw sewage into our rivers. The East India Company experiment proves a profound truth. You cannot simply regulate a for-profit company to make it behave like a public service. When a crisis hits, whether it's a famine in 18th century Bengal or a crumbling sewage system in 21st century Britain, the organization's corporate DNA will always choose profit over the public good. The East India Company is often called a trading company, but that's a lie. Its greatest innovation wasn't trade, it was a sophisticated system of theft, disguised by accounting tricks. Before 1765, Britain paid for Indian goods with silver, like any normal trading partner. But after the company seized control of Bengal's tax system, it devised an insidious new mechanism. First, it collected taxes from the Indian population. Then, it used about a third of that same tax money to buy Indian goods for export to Britain. Indian producers were being paid for their goods with their own stolen tax money. It wasn't trade, it was looting on a continental scale. The scale of this wealth transfer is almost incomprehensible. One economist calculated the total drain from India to Britain was nearly $45 trillion in today's money. That is 17 times the current annual GDP of the entire United Kingdom. This plunder directly financed Britain's Industrial Revolution, and this system wasn't maintained through negotiation. It was enforced by the company's massive private army, which crushed any resistance. This history is a brutal lesson for the UK's modern post-Brexit identity as Global Britain. It's a stark reminder that international trade is not a level playing field. It is, and always has been, an expression of power. Britain's historic trading dominance wasn't just free market genius, it was built on imperial muscle. This leads to the great paradox of sovereignty. The argument for Brexit was to restore sovereignty, to be a rule maker, not a rule taker. The East India Company was the ultimate rule maker precisely because it possessed overwhelming economic and military power. The paradox for the modern UK is that by seeking absolute legal sovereignty and leaving the EU, it may have diminished its practical power on the world stage. Alone, it risks becoming a rule taker, forced to align with the standards of larger economic blocs to secure trade deals. The lesson of the East India Company is that in the unforgiving arena of global trade, it is power, not just legal status, that truly defines a nation's ability to set its own course. So, the East India Company is not some dusty relic, it is a ghost in our modern machine. It pioneered the too-big-to-fail bailout. It perfected the art of corporate lobbying. It wrote the playbook for achieving monopoly through infrastructural control. It demonstrated the catastrophic human cost of privatizing the state. And its history serves as a brutal warning about the true relationship between power and sovereignty in global trade. The fundamental tensions it exposed between the state and the corporation, public good and private profit, national interest and global capital, are the defining challenges of our time. Understanding this company is not just about understanding the past, it's about understanding the forces that continue to shape our present and will define our future. If this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the forces shaping our world, please help our channel grow. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. And for those of you who want to support our research and help us make more videos like this, please consider joining us on Patreon, or join our YouTube membership. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.